The phone slips from my numb fingers and crashes onto our hardwood floor. The screen doesn't crack, but something inside me does. I can't wait to see you tonight, my love. David's words. To Emma. My sister Emma. My knees buckle and I collapse onto our bed, the same bed where he whispered I love you just this morning before kissing my forehead goodbye. The same bed where we planned our future children. The same bed that now feels like quicksand swallowing me whole. My hands shake as I pick up his phone again, scrolling through months of messages I was never meant to see. Each word is a knife twisting deeper. She has no idea we're together. I hate pretending to love her. Soon we can stop this charade. The room spins. My chest burns like someone poured acid directly into my lungs. I can taste copper in my mouth. I've bitten my tongue so hard it's bleeding. Our anniversary photo on the nightstand stares back at me, mocking. David's arm around my waist, both of us smiling at the camera. But now I see it, how his eyes aren't on me. They're looking past me, toward Emma who was taking the picture. How long have they been laughing at me? The front door slams downstairs. David's home early. Honey, I'm back, his voice calls out, cheerful and loving as always. But I know the truth now. Every I love you has been poison wrapped in silk. My reflection in his black phone screen shows a stranger, hollow eyes, pale skin, lips pressed into a thin line. The naive woman who woke up this morning is gone forever. Heavy footsteps climb the stairs toward our bedroom. I have 30 seconds to decide, confront him now and watch him lie to my face, or become someone he's never met before. 6 months ago, I thought I was living in a fairy tale. Every morning started the same way, David's alarm at 6:30, followed by the gentle brush of his lips against my temple. Good morning, beautiful, he'd whisper, his voice still rough with sleep. I'd pretend to be asleep just to hear those words. They made me feel like the heroine in every romance novel I'd devoured as a lonely teenager. Our kitchen was my sanctuary. Sunlight streaming through white curtains, the smell of fresh coffee mixing with David's cologne as he read the news on his tablet. I'd make his eggs exactly how he liked them, over easy with a dash of paprika, and he'd pull me onto his lap while they cooked. What did I do to deserve you? He'd ask, nuzzling my neck. I'd laugh and push him away playfully. You're going to make me burn breakfast. But he never let go. Not then. Those moments felt like proof that I'd finally escaped the shadow of my childhood. Growing up, I was always the plain sister, the reliable one, the girl boys looked through to get to Emma. Emma with her golden hair and easy laugh, who could light up any room just by walking into it. You're so lucky to have such a beautiful sister, people would tell me at family gatherings, as if Emma's beauty somehow reflected well on me by proximity. I learned to smile and nod, swallowing the ache that came with being perpetually second place. But David chose me. Not Emma, me. When she introduced us at her birthday party 3 years ago, I expected the usual pattern, polite conversation followed by him asking for her number. Instead, he spent the entire night talking to me about books, about travel dreams, about the little things that make life worth living. Your sister's nice, he told me as he walked me to my car that night. But you're extraordinary. Extraordinary. No one had ever called me that. Our courtship was everything I'd dreamed of but never believed I deserved. Surprise flowers delivered to my office. Long walks where he actually listened when I talked about my job at the museum. Movie nights where he'd let me pick the film without complaining about romantic comedies. When he proposed on the pier where we had our first official date, I cried so hard he thought I was saying no. I never thought someone like you could love someone like me, I whispered through my tears. He wiped them away with his thumbs. Someone like me should be so lucky to love someone like you. Our wedding was small but perfect. Emma stood beside me as my maid of honor, fixing my veil with tears in her eyes. I'm so happy for you, she said, squeezing my hands. He's perfect for you. During our vows, David's voice cracked when he promised to love me faithfully for all the days of his life. I believed every word. I believed in us. The past 2 years of marriage felt like finally coming home to myself. David never made me feel like I was competing with anyone, especially not Emma. When she'd visit for dinner, he'd include her in conversation, but his attention always returned to me. His hand would find mine under the table, his eyes would seek me out across the room. Emma's lucky to have such a devoted sister, he'd tell me after she left. You take such good care of everyone. I loved that he saw me as the caretaker, the steady one. After years of feeling invisible, being needed felt like the greatest gift. Our Sunday morning routine was sacred: pancakes, crossword puzzles, and lazy conversations about our future. We'd talk about the house we wanted to buy, the children we'd have, the trips we'd take when we'd saved enough money. 2 kids, David would say, pulling me closer on the couch. A boy and a girl. What if they're both boys? Or both girls? Then we'll love them exactly as they are. Just like I love you. Those words wrapped around me like armor against every insecurity I'd ever carried. In David's eyes, I wasn't the second choice or the consolation prize. I was enough. I was everything. Even our fights felt like proof of how solid we were. We'd argue about whose turn it was to do dishes or whether to paint the living room blue or green, then laugh about it an hour later. Real problems seemed impossible when we faced them together. Last month, we'd started seriously talking about trying for a baby. I'd catch David watching children at the park with such tenderness that my heart would swell until I thought it might burst. You're going to be an amazing father, I told him one evening as we walked home from dinner. And you're going to be the most incredible mother. He stopped walking and turned to face me. I can't wait to see you holding our baby. I could picture it so clearly, David's strong arms cradling a tiny person who had his eyes and my stubborn chin. Sunday mornings expanded to include a high chair and sippy cups. The life we were building brick by careful brick. But fairy tales, I'm learning, are just stories we tell ourselves to make the darkness bearable. It started with a laugh. Emma's laugh, floating through our kitchen window on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks ago. But Emma was supposed to be at work. And David had left for the office an hour earlier. I paused at our sink, dish soap still dripping from my hands. The sound came again, definitely Emma's distinctive giggle, the one that made men turn their heads at parties. But softer somehow. Intimate. My heart did this strange little skip, like missing a step on familiar stairs. I moved to the window and peered through the blinds. David's car was in our driveway. He was leaning against the driver's side door, still in his work clothes, looking down at his phone with a smile I'd never seen before. It wasn't his usual grin, this one was secretive, almost guilty. Work emergency, he'd texted me earlier. Might be late tonight. But there he was, home in the middle of the day, smiling at his phone like a teenager with his first crush. The rational part of my brain scrambled for explanations. Maybe he'd forgotten something. Maybe he was texting me. Maybe. His phone buzzed again and that smile returned, wider this time. He typed quickly, then glanced toward our neighbor's house where Emma's car was parked. She must be visiting Mrs. Peterson again, helping with her garden like she always did. How thoughtful of my sister to care for our elderly neighbor. But something cold settled in my stomach anyway. Something that tasted like metal and felt like drowning. David pocketed his phone and walked toward Mrs. Peterson's yard. I watched him knock on the door, watched it open immediately as if someone had been waiting right behind it. The door closed, and he disappeared inside. I stood at our kitchen window for 20 minutes, waiting for him to come back out. When he finally did, his hair was messed up and his shirt was wrinkled. He smoothed both down before getting in his car. My phone buzzed. A text from David, still at the office. This project is killing me. Love you. The lie hit me like a physical blow. That night at dinner, I studied his face as he told me about his difficult day, how stressful work had been, how much he missed me while he was stuck in meetings. You seem tired, I said carefully. Maybe you should take a break tomorrow. Can't. Too much to do. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. But I appreciate you worrying about me. His touch felt the same. His eyes held the same warmth. Everything about him was exactly as it had always been. So why did I feel like I was talking to a stranger? Later, as he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and tried to make sense of what I'd seen. There had to be an explanation. David would never lie to me. Not my David. Not the man who promised to love me faithfully for all the days of his life. But that smile haunted my dreams, the one I'd never seen him give me. I came home early to surprise him with his favorite dinner. The house felt different the moment I stepped inside, charged with an energy that made my skin prickle. Soft music played from the living room, the kind David only put on when we were having romantic evenings. My heart lifted. Maybe he'd planned a surprise for me too. But then I heard Emma's voice, low and breathy, "We can't keep doing this." My grocery bag slipped from my hands, cans rolling across our hardwood floor like tiny thunder. I froze in our entryway, every muscle in my body suddenly made of stone. "I know," David's voice replied, thick with something I'd never heard before. "But I can't stop. You know I can't stop." My legs moved without permission, carrying me toward our living room on silent feet. Each step felt like walking through quicksand, like my body knew what my mind refused to accept. I reached the doorway and my entire world imploded. David had Emma pressed against our mantelpiece, the same mantelpiece where our wedding photos smiled down at them. His hands were tangled in her golden hair, her legs wrapped around his waist. They moved together like they'd done this 1,000 times before, like they belonged to each other in ways I'd thought only David and I did. "I love you," he whispered against her neck. "God, Emma, I love you so much." The words hit me like bullets. Each syllable tore through my chest, shredding everything I thought I knew about my life. About him. About her. About us. Emma's eyes fluttered open and met mine over David's shoulder. Time stopped. Her face went ghost white, but she didn't push him away. She didn't scream or gasp or do any of the things an innocent person caught in an impossible situation might do. Instead, her eyes filled with something that looked almost like relief. "David," she whispered, and there was no panic in her voice. Only resignation. He turned, following her gaze, and when he saw me standing there, his face crumpled like a child caught stealing cookies. But not guilty enough. Not devastated enough for a man who'd just destroyed his marriage. "It's not," he started, then stopped. Even he couldn't finish that lie. My throat had closed completely. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stand there watching my husband and my sister untangle themselves from each other in my living room. David's shirt was unbuttoned. Emma's dress was twisted, her lipstick smeared across her mouth and his neck. How many times had they done this? How many times had they used my home, my bed, my life as the backdrop for their betrayal? How long? The words scraped out of me like broken glass. Emma smoothed down her hair with shaking hands. "It's complicated." "How long?" David flinched at my voice. Good. I wanted him to flinch. I wanted him to feel even a fraction of the agony currently tearing me apart from the inside. 2 years, he whispered. 2 years. Our entire marriage had been a lie. Since before the wedding? My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from somewhere very far away. Emma's silence was answer enough. My knees gave out and I grabbed the doorframe to keep from collapsing. They'd been together before our wedding. While I was trying on wedding dresses, Emma had been sleeping with my fiancé. While I was writing my vows, promising to love him forever, he was promising the same things to her. Why? The word came out broken and raw. We tried to stop, Emma said, and she had the audacity to sound like she was in pain. After you got engaged, we tried to end it, but But you love each other more than you ever loved me. David started toward me, his hands outstretched like he thought he could somehow fix this with touch. That's not true. I do love you. Get away from me. He stopped, his face crumbling further. Please, let me explain. Explain what? How you've been lying to me every single day for 2 years. How you've been sleeping with my sister in my house. How every time you told me you loved me, you were thinking about her. The room spun around me. I could taste bile in the back of my throat, could feel my heart beating so fast I thought it might explode. Everything made sense now. The mysterious phone calls. David's sudden interest in helping Emma with her work problems. The way they'd glance at each other during family dinners, sharing secrets I wasn't part of. The way she'd touch his arm just a little too long when she laughed at his jokes. I'd been living in their love story, playing the role of the oblivious wife while they built a relationship right under my nose. I trusted you, I whispered, looking between them. Both of you. You were the 2 people I trusted most in this world. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing for her pain. Nothing at all. We never meant for you to find out this way, David said. This way. As if there was a good way to discover your husband and sister had been betraying you for years. I turned around and walked toward the door, my legs moving like a robot's. Where are you going? David called after me. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because I had no idea where someone goes when their entire life explodes in the space of 5 minutes. But I knew one thing with crystal clarity: the woman who'd walked into this house was gone forever. I drove to the beach and sat in my car for 3 hours, watching normal people live their normal lives. A father pushed his daughter on the swings. A couple shared ice cream on a bench. Teenagers played volleyball, their laughter carrying on the wind. The world kept spinning as if mine hadn't just been obliterated. My phone buzzed constantly. David. Emma. David again. I turned it off and threw it into my passenger seat like it was contaminated. When the tears finally came, they felt like acid burning through my chest. I sobbed until my throat was raw, until my eyes swelled shut, until I couldn't breathe through my nose anymore. The sound that came out of me wasn't human, it was the howl of something dying. 2 years. They'd been together for 2 years. Every anniversary dinner where Emma had toasted our happiness. Every family Christmas where she'd hugged me and called me her favorite sister. Every time she'd asked for relationship advice, pretending to be single while she was sleeping with my husband. The betrayal was so complete, so perfectly orchestrated, that I almost admired the audacity of it. Almost. I finally drove home after sunset, dreading what I'd find. David's car was gone. Good. I couldn't look at his face without seeing it pressed against Emma's neck, couldn't hear his voice without remembering how it sounded when he whispered "I love you" to her. Inside, our house felt like a crime scene. The living room where I'd found them was exactly as I'd left it, throw pillows scattered, David's shirt draped over the back of our couch. Even the air smelled different, heavy with their betrayal and my humiliation. I walked through our home like a ghost, seeing it all through new eyes. Our wedding photos on the mantel suddenly looked like evidence of fraud. Our shared closet felt like a lie. Our bed, God, our bed, became a monument to my stupidity. How many times had they laughed about me? How many times had Emma smiled to my face while planning her next rendezvous with my husband? I sat on our bathroom floor and called in sick to work for the rest of the week. My boss, Sarah, was concerned. You sound terrible. Do you need anything? Just a few days, I managed. Food poisoning. Another lie to add to the collection my life had become. For 3 days, I didn't shower. Didn't eat. Didn't answer my phone or my door. I just sat in our house, surrounded by the debris of my shattered fairy tale, trying to figure out who I was if I wasn't David's wife and Emma's beloved sister. David came by twice. I watched him through the curtains as he pounded on the door, calling my name. The second time, he used his key, but I'd already changed the locks. Smart thinking for someone who felt completely stupid. Emma left 17 voicemails. I deleted them all without listening. My parents called. I let it go to voicemail too. How could I tell them their golden daughter had been betraying me for years? How could I explain that the son-in-law they adored was a liar who'd been using our family gatherings as opportunities to sneak around with Emma? The shame was suffocating. Everyone would know eventually. Our friends, our families, my coworkers, they'd all find out that I was the naive wife who couldn't see what was happening right under her nose. They'd wonder how I could be so blind, so trusting, so pathetically unaware. Poor thing, they'd whisper. She never saw it coming. But the worst part wasn't the humiliation or even the heartbreak. It was the way my entire past had been rewritten. Every happy memory was now contaminated. Every moment I'd thought was real had been performance art. On the fourth morning, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and didn't recognize the person staring back. Hollow eyes, pale skin, hair that looked like I'd stuck my finger in an electrical socket. I looked exactly like what I was, a woman whose life had exploded. But as I stared at this stranger, something shifted inside me. Maybe it was rage finally breaking through the fog of grief. Maybe it was survival instinct kicking in. Or maybe it was just the realization that I had a choice to make. I could stay on this bathroom floor forever, feeling sorry for myself while David and Emma built their new life on the ashes of mine. Or I could get up. For the first time in 4 days, I stood under the shower spray and let the hot water wash away my tears. As I watched the soap swirl down the drain, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Not happiness, I was nowhere near ready for that. But relief that the pretending was over. Relief that I didn't have to ignore my instincts anymore or explain away the little inconsistencies that had been eating at me for months. Relief that I finally knew exactly who I was dealing with. And as I toweled off and looked at myself in the now clear mirror, I made a decision that would change everything. They wanted to play games with my life? Fine. But they had no idea what they'd awakened. The transformation happened while I was brushing my teeth on day 5. I caught my reflection mid-brush and saw something that made me pause. My eyes weren't hollow anymore, they were calculating. Sharp. The face of a woman who'd been underestimated her entire life and was finally ready to use that to her advantage. David thought I was weak. Emma thought I was naive. They both thought I'd crumble under the weight of their betrayal, maybe disappear quietly so they could step into their new life without the messy complications of my existence. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I rinsed my mouth, straightened my shoulders, and began planning their destruction. First, I needed to know everything. Not just the surface-level betrayal I'd witnessed, but the full scope of their deception. How long, how often, where, when, and most importantly, what they planned to do next. I spent the morning researching privacy laws, divorce proceedings, asset division. I learned about hidden cameras, phone monitoring, private investigators. By lunch, I had 3 consultations scheduled with the city's most ruthless divorce attorneys. Then I called David. Oh, thank God, he breathed when he heard my voice. Baby, I've been going crazy. We need to talk. You're right, I said, keeping my tone soft and broken. We do need to talk. Can you come home tonight? The relief in his voice was almost insulting. Of course. I'll bring dinner. Your favorite from Antonio's. That would be nice. When he arrived that evening, I was the picture of wounded femininity. Red-rimmed eyes, tissues strategically placed around the living room, my hair in the messy bun he always said made me look vulnerable. I'm so sorry, he began before he'd even closed the door. I never wanted you to find out like that. We never wanted to hurt you. I let him talk. Let him spin his web of half-truths and manufactured guilt. He explained how he and Emma had fallen in love despite trying to fight it. How they'd planned to tell me after our anniversary dinner next week. How much they both cared about me and wanted to handle this the right way. "I still love you," he said, reaching for my hands. "Just not the same way I love her." The audacity was breathtaking. But I squeezed his fingers and nodded like I understood. "I need time," I whispered. "Can you stay at your brother's for a while? Just until I figure out what I want to do." He agreed immediately, probably thrilled to have more freedom to be with Emma without sneaking around. After he left, I installed security cameras in every room of our house. Tiny, invisible things that would record everything when they inevitably came here to be together. I cloned his laptop while he was packing, copied his phone data while he hugged me goodbye. The next morning, I hired Marcus Rivera, a private investigator who looked like someone you definitely didn't want to cross. His rates were brutal, but he guaranteed results. "I want to know everything," I told him. "Every hotel. Every lie. Every time they used our home. I want dates, times, receipts, photos, everything that will hold up in court." He smiled like a shark scenting blood in the water. "Consider it done." Then I began performing the role of my lifetime, the heartbroken wife trying to save her marriage. I called Emma, voice shaking with carefully practiced tears. "I need to understand," I sobbed. "Help me understand how this happened." She took the bait completely, meeting me for coffee where I wore a wire and she spilled everything. How it started the night before my engagement party. How they'd been together in our bed dozens of times. How they'd laughed about my trust, my devotion, my complete obliviousness. "You were always so good to me," she said, tears streaming down her face. "That's what made it so hard." Hard. As if cheating with my husband was some kind of burden she'd nobly carried. I hugged her when we parted ways, whispering that I forgave her, that family was more important than anything. She believed every word. Meanwhile, Marcus was working his magic. Hotel receipts from David's credit card. Photos of them entering and leaving together. A paper trail of lies that stretched back 2 years. Even better, he discovered David had been hiding money in separate accounts, planning to leave me with as little as possible. My lawyer, Patricia Chin, reviewed everything with predatory satisfaction. "He's going to lose his shirt," she said simply. "And your sister's professional reputation won't survive this either." Emma was a licensed therapist. Adultery with a client's family member violated several ethical codes. Her career would be over before the ink dried on our divorce papers. But the most delicious discovery came 3 weeks into my investigation. They were already planning their engagement party. Marcus had photos of Emma trying on wedding dresses, David shopping for rings. They'd reserved a venue for Christmas Eve, our anniversary. They weren't just stealing my husband. They were stealing my entire future, gift wrapping it, and presenting it as their own love story. Perfect. Because now I knew exactly when to strike. I continued playing the devastated wife, meeting David for reconciliation dinners where I pumped him for information while wearing recording devices. I had coffee dates with Emma where she confessed more details, thinking she was helping me process our family's destruction. They both thought they were managing my emotional breakdown so skillfully. Poor, fragile me, needing their gentle guidance through the trauma they'd inflicted. If they only knew that every tear, every trembling hand, every broken whisper was calculated revenge in action. Christmas Eve was 6 weeks away. 6 weeks to gather the final pieces of evidence I needed to destroy them both completely. 6 weeks to plan the most spectacular public humiliation of their lives. They thought they'd stolen my fairy tale ending. They had no idea I was writing a completely different kind of story. The first crack in their confidence came 3 weeks into my performance. I was having lunch with Emma, playing the role of the confused, hurt sister seeking guidance. She'd been coaching me through my healing process, dispensing wisdom about forgiveness and moving forward while secretly planning her Christmas Eve engagement to my husband. "You seem different today," she said, studying my face. "Stronger somehow." I smiled sadly. My therapist says I'm making progress. Learning to trust my instincts again. The word instincts made her fork freeze halfway to her mouth. Good. Let her wonder what instincts I was developing. That's wonderful, she said, but her voice had lost its warmth. What kind of instincts? Oh, you know. Reading people better. Seeing through lies. I met her eyes directly. She says I was too trusting before. Too willing to believe what people told me instead of what they showed me. Emma's face went pale. She excused herself to use the bathroom, and I watched her fumble for her phone as she walked away. Probably texting David about our conversation. Let them panic. That evening, David called with unusual urgency. How are you feeling? Emma said you seemed different today. Different how? I don't know. She said you were asking strange questions. About what? Long pause. About trust. And lies. I let the silence stretch until he was practically squirming through the phone. David, are you worried I'm getting better? Because that seems odd for someone who claims to care about me. No. Of course not. I want to make sure you're okay. I'm learning to be okay without depending on other people for my happiness. Isn't that what you wanted? Another pause. Yes. Absolutely. But his voice said otherwise. The second crack came when I started showing up places they didn't expect me. Their favorite coffee shop on Tuesday mornings. The bookstore where Emma worked late on Thursdays. The gym David had suddenly joined 3 months ago. I never confronted them, never made a scene. I'd just appear, smile warmly, and make pleasant conversation before leaving. But I watched their faces, saw the paranoia growing behind their eyes. Why were you at Morrison's cafe this morning? David asked after one such encounter. I like their scones. Since when is that suspicious? It's not, we used to go there together. We did. But now I go alone. Is that a problem? I could hear him struggling for words that wouldn't reveal too much. No, of course not. The third crack was the most satisfying. I started mentioning things I shouldn't know, dates they'd been together, places they'd visited, details from their private conversations that Emma had shared thinking she was helping me heal. I hope you had a good time in Monterey last weekend, I told David casually during one of our reconciliation dinners. His fork clattered against his plate. How did you? How did I what? Nothing. I wasn't in Monterey. I tilted my head innocently. Oh, I must have misunderstood. Emma mentioned something about wine tasting, and I just assumed. I let the sentence hang there, watching him realize that Emma had been talking too much, revealing details of their secret life. They started turning on each other after that. Emma accused David of being careless with information. David blamed Emma for oversharing during our sister talks. I watched their perfect love story develop stress fractures as paranoia ate away at their trust. The power dynamic was shifting, and we all knew it. But late at night, alone in our house with my evidence files spread across the dining table, doubts crept in like poison. Was I becoming like them? Was I turning into someone who lied and manipulated to get what she wanted? The woman I used to be would have confronted them directly, demanded honesty, maybe even tried to forgive. But that woman was dead, murdered by their betrayal in our living room 6 weeks ago. This new version of me felt foreign sometimes. Calculating where I'd once been trusting. Cold where I'd once been warm. Strategic where I'd once been spontaneous. Am I the villain now? I asked my reflection one night. But then I remembered David's hands in Emma's hair. His voice whispering love to her while wearing his wedding ring. The 2 years of lies, the stolen moments, the way they'd planned to humiliate me on our anniversary. No. I wasn't the villain. I was just finally playing their game by their rules. Christmas Eve was 2 weeks away. 2 weeks until their engagement party, where they'd celebrate their love story built on the ashes of mine. They thought they were nervous now. They had no idea what real fear looked like. But they were about to learn. The Rosewood Hotel ballroom glittered with fairy lights and champagne glasses. Emma had chosen our venue, the same place David had proposed to me 3 years ago. 50 guests mingled, celebrating what they believed was a spontaneous engagement between my heartbroken sister and my compassionate ex-husband who'd found love again after our amicable separation. I watched from the back, invisible in my black dress, as Emma glowed in white silk that cost more than most people's rent. David stood beside her in his best suit, the one I'd bought him for our anniversary last year. They looked radiant. Happy. Like people who'd overcome obstacles to find their soulmate. It was about to be the performance of their lives. Ladies and gentlemen, the DJ announced Emma would like to say a few words. Emma took the microphone with trembling hands. Thank you all for being here tonight. I know this situation is unconventional. But sometimes love finds you in unexpected ways. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. How romantic, their faces said. How brave of them to follow their hearts. David and I never planned this, she continued, her voice gaining strength. It just happened. And we're grateful for those who've supported us through this difficult transition. That was my cue. I walked toward the front of the room, heels clicking against marble. Conversations died as people recognized me. David's face went white. Emma's smile froze mid-sentence. May I? I asked, reaching for the microphone. Emma had no choice but to hand it over. The room held its breath. Thank you, Emma. I have a few words to share too. I turned to face the crowd, David's family, Emma's friends, colleagues who thought they were witnessing a beautiful love story. You're right, Emma. Love does find you in unexpected ways. Like when you find it with your sister's husband 2 weeks before her wedding. Gasps erupted. David stepped forward. Don't what? Don't tell them the truth about your 2-year affair? Don't mention the hotel receipts I have? The photos? The recordings? Emma grabbed my arm. Stop this. I pulled away gently. Stop what? Congratulating you? You should be proud. It takes real commitment to betray someone for 24 months straight. The crowd was shifting, whispers turning to murmurs of shock. David's mother stood up, her face horrified. David, is this true? It's complicated. It's simple, I interrupted. They've been sleeping together since before my wedding. Every family dinner where Emma hugged me. Every anniversary David celebrated with me. Every time they sat across from each other at our table, they were laughing at how stupid I was. We never laughed at you, Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. I pulled out my phone and played a recording, Emma's voice saying, she's so oblivious. Yesterday she thanked me for being such a supportive sister. The sound echoed through the silent ballroom like a gunshot. You used our home, I continued, my voice steady and clear. Our bed. Our life. You planned this engagement party for Christmas Eve, which happens to be my actual anniversary with David. David's brother stood up and walked toward the exit. Others followed. Please, David begged the departing crowd. Let us explain. Explain what? I turned to face him directly. How you hid money in separate accounts. How you've been planning to leave me with nothing. How you chose our anniversary to celebrate your engagement because you thought it was poetic. His face crumpled. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. No, it wasn't. You were supposed to humiliate me privately, then emerge as the couple who found love after tragedy. Star-crossed lovers who couldn't help themselves. Emma was sobbing now, her white dress stained with tears and running mascara. But here's what you didn't count on, I said, my voice rising above her cries. I'm not the naive little girl you thought you could destroy. I'm not the oblivious wife who'd disappear quietly into the night. I looked around the half-empty room. I'm someone who documents everything. Someone who builds cases. Someone who plays the long game. David reached for me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry you got caught. There's a difference. I handed the microphone back to Emma, who stood frozen in her ruined dress. Congratulations on your engagement, I said loudly enough for everyone to hear. I hope you'll be very happy together. You certainly worked hard enough for it. I walked toward the exit, my head high, my shoulders straight. Behind me, Emma's sobs echoed through the ballroom as the last guests gathered their coats and whispered their way toward the door. Justice, I'd learned, didn't always roar. Sometimes it spoke quietly and walked away with dignity. But it always had the last word. The fallout was swift and merciless. By morning, the video was everywhere. Someone had live-streamed my speech, and it spread through social media like wildfire. #Christmas Eve Revenge was trending before I'd even finished my coffee. David's law firm called an emergency meeting. Adultery scandals don't play well with family law clients, and David specialized in divorce cases. The irony was exquisite. By noon, he was on administrative leave pending a full ethics review. Emma's licensing board received an anonymous complaint, complete with documentation of her affair with a client's family member. Her therapy practice suspended her immediately. 2 years of graduate school and 5 years building her reputation, destroyed in a single morning. I watched it all unfold from my new apartment across town, sipping tea and reading the messages flooding my phone. "You're my hero," texted my college roommate. "Iconic," wrote my cousin Sarah. Even strangers were reaching out with their own betrayal stories, thanking me for showing them what strength looked like. But the most satisfying message came from David's mother. "I'm ashamed of my son. You deserved so much better." The divorce proceedings were a formality. Patricia had built an airtight case with Marcus's evidence. David's hidden assets were exposed, his lies documented, his credibility shredded. The judge awarded me 70% of our joint assets, the house, and alimony for 5 years. Emma tried to call 17 times that first week. I never answered. What was left to say? David showed up at my apartment once, looking haggard and desperate. "I know I have no right to ask, but can we talk?" We did talk. For 3 years. Every conversation was a lie. "I loved you. I still love you. You loved the idea of me. The safe choice. The reliable wife who'd never suspect her perfect husband was sleeping with her sister." He started crying then, right there in my doorway. I threw away everything good for something that wasn't even real. "Yes, you did." I closed the door and never saw him again. The strangest part was how light I felt. I'd expected anger to consume me, but instead, I felt free. The weight of pretending to be happy in a marriage built on lies had lifted completely. I thought betrayal had broken me, but I was wrong. It had rebuilt me into someone stronger, someone who trusted her instincts, someone who refused to accept less than she deserved. My new apartment was small but entirely mine. I painted the walls bright yellow, a color David had always hated. I bought plants that needed daily attention because I finally had mental space to care for living things again. I started taking pottery classes on Thursday evenings. Learned to tango on weekends. Read books David had dismissed as too emotional or unrealistic. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't defined by someone else's needs or expectations. At work, I got the promotion I'd been passed over for twice. Apparently, my new confidence was impossible to ignore. "You seem different," my boss Sarah said during my performance review. "More present. More decisive." I was different. The woman who'd trusted blindly was gone, replaced by someone who verified before she believed, who set boundaries without apology, who valued her own opinion above others' approval. 6 months later, Emma sent a letter. No return address, postmarked from Arizona. I know you'll probably throw this away without reading it, she wrote, but I need you to know that what David and I had wasn't real. It was built on lies and secrecy and the thrill of betraying you. Without that forbidden element, we had nothing. We broke up 3 weeks after the engagement party. I read it twice, then threw it away without a second thought. Their relationship had been a house of cards, impressive from a distance but structurally unsound. Of course, it had collapsed the moment it was exposed to daylight. They destroyed a marriage, 2 careers, and a family for something that couldn't survive basic honesty. The justice was poetic. Some nights, I still felt echoes of the woman I used to be, the one who trusted easily, loved deeply, forgave quickly. I missed her innocence sometimes. But I didn't miss the blindness that came with it. The woman I'd become was harder to fool, impossible to manipulate, and completely unafraid of being alone. She was someone I was proud to know, someone I actually liked spending time with. I thought love meant never questioning, never doubting, never protecting yourself. Now I knew better. Real love didn't require you to ignore red flags or explain away inconsistencies. Real love didn't ask you to be small so someone else could feel big. And real love, I was learning, started with loving yourself enough to demand better. I'm standing in my bedroom again, holding a phone with trembling hands. But this time, the trembling isn't from heartbreak. It's from laughter. The screen shows a news article, local attorney faces disbarment after ethics violation. David's professional headshot stares back at me, but his eyes look hollow now, defeated. Below it, another headline, therapist loses license following adultery scandal. I set the phone down on my nightstand, not the one I shared with David, but the vintage piece I found at an antique shop last month. Everything in this room is mine now. Chosen by me, paid for by me, loved by me. The woman who collapsed on that marital bed a year ago is gone. She died the moment she saw her husband kissing her sister, and something infinitely stronger was born from her ashes. That woman thought betrayal was the end of her story. This woman knows it was actually the beginning. My coffee grows cold as I scroll through messages from friends, family, even strangers who've followed my journey. Their words are filled with admiration, support, gratitude for showing them what real strength looks like. But the most important message isn't on my phone at all. It's written in the way I sleep peacefully now, without checking David's location or wondering why his phone is buzzing. It's in the mirror that reflects a woman who trusts herself completely. It's in the life I'm building with my own 2 hands. I pick up my coffee and walk to the window, watching the sun rise over my new neighborhood. Somewhere across town, David and Emma are dealing with the consequences of their choices. I don't hate them anymore. I don't think about them at all. Because the best revenge, I've learned, isn't destroying your enemies. It's building a life so beautiful that their betrayal becomes the gift that made it possible. Some stories end with, and they lived happily ever after. Mine ends with something better, and she lived. Fully, fearlessly, and completely on her own terms. The phone in my hand isn't showing messages of betrayal anymore. It's showing possibilities, opportunities, and most importantly, proof that the woman they tried to break became unbreakable instead. And that's a story worth telling.